Hey, I'm Abby and welcome back to the Life Work Balance YouTube channel. Today I would like to talk to you about how to answer the interview question, what is your expected salary? But before we jump into that, please go ahead and give this video a thumbs up if you're looking forward to today's video. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. Before I jump into actually how to answer this question, there's a couple of things to know. The first is that there is a version of this question that is actually illegal to ask in most parts of the United States. If it's not already illegal, it will be illegal shortly. The question that is illegal is, what is your current salary? The reason this question is forbidden during interviews is because your answer could potentially be used to underpay you. By making this type of question illegal, both on applications and during the interview process, the hope is that interviewers will give a fair and equitable salary to anyone who applies. And that salary will not be based off of what someone previously made in a position that they came from before. Instead, the hope is that the position will be paid equitably for the other positions that are similar to it in the department or in the organization, and an equitable market rate. This means that the pay for the position is equitable across multiple organizations, but that doesn't necessarily mean the pay is competitive. It just means that it's equitable or within the range of being acceptable for this type of position. So if you are ever asked the question, what is your current salary or how much do you currently make? Red flags should go off and you should not answer that question. So it is illegal for you to be asked, what is your current salary during an interview? However, it is not illegal and it is perfectly reasonable to ask you what your expected salary is. So this is not a bad question. It is perfectly reasonable because you may have very high expectations for a salary, and if an employer cannot meet those expectations, it's nice to know that up front. All right, so there may be two different times when you are asked the question, what are your salary expectations? You may be asked this question at the beginning of the interview process or at the end of the interview process. Now, depending on when you are asked this question, there are multiple ways that you could respond. So let's start off with the beginning of the interview process. If you are asked the question, what are your salary expectations at the beginning of the interview process, do not give an actual number. Really, if you give a number or even a range right now at the beginning of the process, you don't have enough information about the position or even the organization to make an educated comment about what your expected salary is. Now, you may know how much you would like to make, but you don't really know if that is equitable for the position based on the duties and responsibilities or even the types of benefits that might be offered by the organization. So, if you are asked this question at the beginning of the interview process, I recommend doing some research before you respond. Now, this means you have to do your research ahead of time before the interview. The first thing you need to look for is, was there a hiring range listed on the job posting? If so, it is perfectly reasonable to refer to this hiring range. If there was no hiring range listed on the job posting, then you do not want to be the first one to give a number. It is perfectly acceptable and reasonable to say that you would like to learn a little bit more about the job responsibilities, the position, and the organization before giving your expected salary. I do recommend mentioning that your salary expectations are flexible, and then you can add in a few details about the experience and the value you think that your experience and or education adds to you in the position and how that might change the salary. So for example, you could say something like, my salary expectations are flexible. I have significant education and experience that adds to my value as a potential candidate for this position. I would like to learn a little bit more about the position, what my responsibilities would look like. From there, we can determine what a fair salary would be for the position. Now, having a response like this will be really beneficial for you because it shows that you are flexible, that you're willing to compromise, that you also know that you can't commit to a number based off of the little information that you have already. And it also lets the interviewer know that you're open to discussion and that you would like to discuss this further once you learn a little bit more about the position. This is an important way to respond. because it doesn't discount the question when it's asked by the interviewer. It does give a thorough, thoughtful response, and it doesn't back you into a corner because you haven't given a number. The second time where you may be asked this question is at the end of the interview process. If this question is asked at the end of the process, it's time to let the negotiation begin. You do not want to give them a number right out of the gate. Ideally, they will be the first to give a number. If you give a number, you might aim too high or too low. If you aim too high, the organization might decide that they wasted their time with you and that there was no way they could have hired you anyway. And they might just decide right off the bat, based off of your salary expectations, that you are not a good fit for the position. Or you might aim too low and undersell yourself. That does two things. One, it lets the organization potentially take advantage of you and underpay you for the position so that you are not getting paid an equitable amount. And two, it also shows that you might undervalue yourself or that you haven't educated yourself in the type of work this does. And it might indicate that you're not knowledgeable enough to determine what a reasonable salary might be. So by giving a number, you might go too high or too low, and that could backfire either way. If you give a range, don't give a range if you're asked this question at the beginning of the interview process, but it is reasonable to give a range towards the end of the interview process. However, just note that the hiring manager or the organization will try to go towards the bottom of that range, and you will likely expect to get paid towards the top of that range. So if you do give a range, just know that both parties will have different expectations. You will expect to be paid towards the high end of that range, and the organization will likely expect to pay you towards the low end of the range. So if you're going to give a range, make sure that you are okay with getting paid at the low end of the range, or even somewhere in between the middle and the low end of the range. I promise the organization will not be upset if you don't give them a number. They likely have a number in mind based off of their budget. So if you can begin the negotiation process and determine what seems fair to them, that can be a starting place for you. If you are the first one to give a number, you've started to show your cards too soon. Ideally, you can give them a range, or they will give you a salary that they're expecting and you can negotiate from there. Now, there may be some organizations that don't allow for negotiation based off of policy or even budget. I cross my fingers and hope that these organizations or these positions are upfront from the beginning to let candidates know that they're not flexible on salary. However, sometimes that doesn't happen. So the sooner in the interview process you can start to discuss potential salary, the better. Now, this doesn't mean that you bring it up at the very beginning in your very first interview. However, you do not want salary to come up when you're signing your offer letter, because you could feel blindsided by how low the organization decides to pay you, or the organization could feel blindsided by you not accepting the position because your salary expectations are higher than what they're able to offer. So ideally, this question will come up during the interview process. I hope that you were able to get some good tips from this video so that you know how to respond if they were to ask you this question at the beginning of the interview process or at the end of the interview process. If you have any additional questions, thoughts, or ideas about this, please let me know in the comments box below. I read through all of the comments and I try to respond to each of them individually. So please go ahead and leave me a comment if you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas. If you liked this video, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button as well as the bell so that you can receive life-work balance advice delivered directly to you every Sunday. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.